Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua and I'm going to be your presenter. I hope everyone can hear my audio okay. It sounds like it's coming through loud and clear. At least that's what it appears to me to be. We're here to talk about entering employees and independent contractors in Church Windows Payroll today. We're here for the next 20 minutes or so. Before we get started on our topic, first of all, please use the little red arrow on the sidebar of your webinar control panel to minimize that control panel. Gets it out of the way, allows you to see more of the visual presentation here. We are recording today's webinar event. It will be produced on our website sometime probably today, maybe tomorrow, or at the latest, latest earlier next week, but probably even later today. You can certainly revisit that. The topic that we're working on today is taken from our P101 workbook, pages 9 to 18. So if you've got those payroll workbooks, you may want to grab those and turn to pages 9 to 18 because that's what I'm using as the printed material for today's event. If you have questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel for me. I will do my best to keep an eye on those, repeat the questions so everyone understands what's being asked, and then we'll see what we can do to get that answered for you, okay? Please keep the questions on our topic today, which is about setting up and adding independent contractors or employees. There may be another webinar event that's more suited to other questions you may have, or you're welcome to call our support staff and talk to one of our technicians who can perhaps answer your question more quickly. All right, so page 9 talks about independent contractor file, and how we access those. Let me introduce my highlighter friend here. Is over here under our data setup. This is where we're going to do all of this work. Is that when we go to data setup, we'll see we have two options here: employee file and independent contractor file. They're all part of payroll, but they are different sections of the payroll database. So if we click on independent contractor file, it shows we have one contractor here, Joe Greenthumb. He's clearly our maintenance, landscaping, maintenance guy, lawn service, what have you, clearly based on that pay label. But if we want to add a new contractor to payroll, we simply click the add button here in the upper right-hand corner, right up here. There's our add button, that when we click on that, it opens up our window to add independent contractor. So we can enter their name. You know, if they're doing business as a different name, we can put in something in the DBA with all of their pertinent address, city, state, phone, and tax ID number if applicable. The paragraph at the bottom of page 9 does mention specifically that if under current IRS regulations, a independent contractor is someone who has been paid $600 or more during a payroll year, and they should receive a miscellaneous 1099, and payroll, of course, can produce that for you if you wish. We encourage you to check out the independent contractor, employee or independent contractor information on the IRS's website if you're unsure whether someone is categorized or should be categorized as an employee or a contractor. We won't get into that today. But simply, you know, you can enter the contractor, you can set up custom pay labels for them based on a job description for something that they're doing, up to 3 labels with 3 default pay rates. You can have the system back up federal withholding and state tax withholding if you wish, but typically that doesn't occur in most cases. But once you have them set up, you would simply click OK, and then they're set up in a contractor file as a contractor for you, okay? And then you simply click OK through the contractor file. Yes, it does show, you know, you can change the withholding status. It does show you pay totals for the year and dates paid here when we have information and pays posted for them. Keep in mind, folks, I like to encourage you to keep in mind that you can also produce miscellaneous 1099s for contractors from accounting. So there is no requirement to use the Church Windows Payroll module in order to produce miscellaneous 1099s for contractors. You can do that from accounting directly. You don't have to do it through payroll. Just an FYI for you, okay? Nothing too terribly complicated about setting these folks up here, okay? Once they're added into the database, they can then be linked over to accounting, and you can begin posting either contractor checks or employee file checks either way. So to add employees, we then go back to data setup and now employee file. And then when we click on that, it opens up kind of a similar window, but it's certainly got a different level of complexity to it here. But basically, again, similar to adding our contractors, we go to the add button in the upper right corner up here. It opens up our basic information, you know, about our employee, is their department that they belong to. Can't stress this enough that on page 11 there it talks about if the person is a minister, and you would check the box labeled minister. Let me get out my highlighter again and kind of point that out. Here's the minister box. It's available even when we've added the basic employee information. But if they're a minister, they're not subject to standard Social Security and Medicare withholding, and therefore that is instructing the system that there is no match for Social Security and Medicare, and also none withheld, okay? But basically, we would simply type in the name of the employee, adding in their address, etc. If I got my characters right without having my cap locks on, that would probably help. Choosing the default withholding state or the withholding state for them. Also entering their Social Security number is vitally important. Software won't allow us to print W-2s for an employee that has an incomplete or a blank Social Security number, so it is important that you do get that completed W-4 from the employee. You can also set up their federal filing status here as single or married. When you have that, you can check to leave it open, but when you're finished with the basic employee information, you can then click OK. It then pops up with our dialog box that says, please remember to go to the payroll system administration menu to set up the account numbers for the employee, and that simply allows you then, and you should do that before you calculate their first check, because if not, you'll have to manually populate the accounts before transferring it into accounting. So you'll want to do that after you set up the employee file here first thing, but before you post their first pay. Okay, so thank you very much for the reminder, Payroll. Appreciate that. We click OK. It now leaves us on Emma's record, and now we're working exclusively with the tabs that are set up for the employee here now in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's detailed in that screenshot at the bottom of page 11. So we're going to kind of move through these fairly quickly just based on our time constraints here. But I think it's pretty intuitive in terms of how this works. So on each one of these tabs has different information. So on our Pay General 1 tab, we set, is the employee hourly or salaried, or are they no longer working with the church at the church anymore, so they might be terminated. Then, based on their pay type, then how often are they paid, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or semi-monthly? So we're going to say in this case semi-monthly. We're going to say that she's hourly. Then as we scroll down our General 1 tab, we then can enter a default number of hours worked and a pay rate if we wish. Based on her being hourly, we can do that. So let's say that she is scheduled to work 28 hours a week for the church and at, say, $13 an hour, okay? Overtime and additional can also be set, but that's not typical. I'm only going to enter things, folks, here under my contractor or employee file that are permanently their setup, parts of their setup for their employee pay. If I'm making a temporary change to a pay setup, I'm not necessarily going to come into the employee file to make those changes. So if I'm paying somebody overtime, I may not need to come into the actual employee file to record that. I can record that or enter those additional overtime or vacation times as I'm calculating the pay. If the employees earn X number of hours per pay period for vacation or sick time, meaning it's earned as opposed to just awarded contingent on their employment, you would set that up here as well. Okay. Again, they earn a third of a pay date or a half a pay date, a vacation day or sick time. Based on each pay period, you would enter that. That's essentially what that is. Once we've made our changes or entries, we would then click apply. We'll move to General 2. Different information on our General 2. We're now on page 13 of our workbook pages. So we now look at General 2. There's additional information we can enter about the employee here, alternate address information, miscellaneous employee information like their birth date, job description or position, date hired, terminated, last raise, basically just information that you can record about the employee. Probably the ones I see most are last raise date and last raise amount, or terminated or hired. Well, I guess they all can be used either way. And of course, emergency contact information. All right. So yeah, if you have emergency contact info, name and phone number, that would be entered here. Finally, at the bottom of page General 2, we have our, if the church decides to use the direct deposit function that Payroll offers, this is where you would check to use direct deposit for the employee, and you would enter the appropriate routing and account number information with the respective account type. Okay. These other information fields below this would only be applicable or required if it was determined from when we had sent the bank the file that the default setup for the direct deposit file for Payroll did not work. Otherwise, we're not going to get into this detail today, but this is where you would enable that, okay? And enter, again, the employee's routing and account number and account type if applicable. Again, if something was entered here, we would click Apply, and then we'll move to the Federal tab. So on our Federal tab, this is where we, again, it took our federal filing status from our, adding the basic employee information. So we have to determine if they're single or married. Are they wanting us to withhold federal tax based on the federal tax tables? Also, is there an additional amount or percent that they would like us to withhold? Again, use tax tables is the most common thing we'll see, but sometimes there is a need to use the additional amount or percent. And as far as pastors are concerned, if they would like you to withhold their self-employment tax, you would check that as well. And if there is a retirement plan that needs to be notated on the W-2 in box 13 as well, okay? But again, in this case, Emma, and you would also, of course, enter the number of exemptions that the employee, sorry, I almost overlooked that, the number of exemptions the employee would be claiming based on the information that they had provided for you on their completed and signed W-4. So in this case, we're going to say, yes, Emma has decided that she wants one tax exemption for federal. And again, we would simply click Apply, okay? Again, folks, this is virtually all the information here is going to be taken based on a completed W-4, okay? Once you've entered the employee federal information, you'll roll to the state tab. Same thing, we're going to choose the default withholding state. Again, that may be where the employee lives, not necessarily where they work, and that's kind of a tricky area. If you have employees that work in your state but live in another, you may need to contact the state tax authorities in both states to determine how that is best handled for them, okay? Because every state is different when those types of things. There's kind of a gray area sometimes, and it may be impacting, both states that occur that way, okay? But again, depending on your state that's selected, you'll have different options for filing status, so you'll have to pay attention to those. Again, it's very similar to, some states don't have state tax, so there is no such thing as use tax tables, okay? But again, if there are, you would use most tax tables, again, in most cases. And we also have the additional amount or percent to be withheld, and we can enter a number of exemptions, again, dependent or contingent on what your state's requirements are. So you have to pay attention to these, okay? I'm just using Ohio because that's our state, but you'll have to pay attention to what your state tab shows when you're recording and setting up your employees for your state or their state, as the case may be, okay? Again, after any changes are made, so we'll say that Emma is also deciding to have one exemption for the state of Ohio. Again, clicking Apply. She's okay with tax tables, no additional amount or percent to be withheld, but if she did, I would check that and then enter the amount or percent accordingly. Again, then once we click Apply, we're going to move to our local tax tab, okay? So this is not the screen where the local taxes are set up. This is simply, folks, where they are assigned, okay? When we click in the first available ID box, notice we get a drop-down menu, and we see the list of local taxes that we have already set up under our local tax wizard in Church Windows Payroll. Okay, we're not going to get into the local tax wizard today. I believe we have you have information in your help files, or there is a video or documentation out on our support center on setting up and working with local taxes. Okay, but we're going to say that because she is a Columbus resident, she's subject to Columbus local. Again, you can add an additional amount if you wish. Notice, folks, there are year-to-date totals, so once we begin paying Emma James her pay, it is going to show the amount of local taxable wages and amounts withheld for those once we start showing those. Again, clicking Apply. Then we're going to move to our Deductions tab. Again, the deductions are not set up here. They're set up under our Data Setup and Deductions file. Again, not something we're getting into today. Again, when you click in the first available ID box, it does reveal a list of deductions that are already set up that we can now choose to have Emma participate in if she wishes. Okay, so perhaps we've got an insurance plan, health insurance plan, that she can have an X number of dollars or percent deducted from her pay to apply to that. So right here I can enter the amount or the percent that I want to have deducted from her pay. So let's say the premium on that plan on a monthly or on a per pay basis is $35, E for every pay. I can go down and then choose other deductions if there are others that she wants to participate in a pension plan. Maybe she wants to have $50 deducted per pay for that, what have you, or a percent. And once I've entered those deductions, similarly, I would click Apply, and then finally moving over to our Allowances tab. Sorry, folks, I'm only got a couple minutes here, so I want to make sure we're trying to get through as much of this as evenly as we can. So on the bottom of page 17, it talks about our allowances. Now, allowances, folks, as opposed to money, unlike deductions where money is deducted from an employee's pay, allowances are monies that are added to an employee's pay. So most commonly where we see this in Church Windows Payroll is for things like, for folks for like ministers, where we've got monies that are added into their pay for things like housing allowances or reimbursements, mileage reimbursements, things like that. Okay. Could be that if we have an employee who's working 2 job functions, allowances could be used for that. But in this case, Emma is not a clergy person on our staff, and so therefore she's not. She doesn't have housing or automobile or mileage reimbursable plans. But if she were, I could certainly add those and specify the amounts as well. And finally, again, after clicking Apply, going to the Totals tab, and it does reveal a list of W-2 941 totals in both year-to-date and then a breakdown for each employee by quarter. So if I go back to one of my other employees where I do have pay for the year, we do notice that we do have year-to-date totals for Jimmy Hilliard for federal, state, Social Security, Medicare, local, state, etc., how much of their gross taxable wages there are, how much has been withheld, and then a breakdown by quarter for that. Okay. But then once I'm done with that employee, I would click Apply and either add the next employee or click OK, and then I would go to the account number setup and link them into accounting in order before my first pay to ensure that the system knows what accounts to debit and credit in accounting. So it's right here under account number setup. Okay. All right. So that's our top